Hello there, and welcome to the Stop Catfishing, How Threat Actors Really See You presentation. My name is Ken Underhill. I'll be your presenter for this session. Many people in the industry probably know me. If you don't, I've basically helped a lot of people and I've won some awards. I started my career in healthcare IT, so I actually worked as a clinician. I worked as a pediatric nurse for a number of years, moved back into the IT realm. I was in IT many, many years before I was a nurse. And came back into IT, worked in network engineering, network security around that, moved more into the cybersecurity or quote unquote cybersecurity type of roles. It wasn't called that back then. But from there, I've worked a variety of roles, worked as a pen tester and other things. I'm currently an executive for a startup, as well as running multiple companies myself. I also have a TV show, and that's what you see depicted in the top right there. And like I said, I've won multiple awards. I'm up for some others, et cetera, et cetera. That's enough about me. Long story short, helped a lot of people, and that's what really matters. So what is the problem we're going to be talking about today? Well, we've got this issue out there, and if you haven't experienced this yet, you are very, very lucky as an organization. But what a lot of places are finding is that their cybersecurity premiums are going up, and they're literally going up in many cases overnight. And we're seeing, man, it's crazy. We're seeing like a 5x, 10x increase, especially for like your small, medium-sized businesses. And so for a lot of them, that type of increase, that puts them out of business. They can't afford that insurance. And why is that happening? Well, one of the main reasons is all these supply chain attacks. So insurance companies, just like with your car insurance or anything else, they focus on risk. And traditionally, cyber's been kind of ignored as far as a risk standpoint and saying, well, okay, there might be a breach or something like that. No big deal. So rates have, been pretty stagnant over the years for the most part. But with all these more public attacks, insurance companies are saying, whoa, wait a minute here. What's going on? Is this company affected? Well, that's a big risk. So even though you as an organization haven't been targeted, well, you realistically have, and you realistically have been hacked as well. But even though you're not in the news of saying, hey, company X has got a data breach, you're still a risk because other companies in your industry have been hit, or just the fact that there's all these supply chain attacks out there going on, and it's a risk now for these insurers. So again, just like your car insurance, if you get in a bunch of accidents, if you drink and drive, anything like that, or even if you're a male versus a female when you're younger, there's a bigger risk that you may be involved in an accident where the insurance company has to pay money. And so because of that risk, your premiums are a little higher. So we're seeing that same effect here in cyber lately, especially for the small to mid-sized organizations. And unfortunately, a lot of them can't afford that. Now, the other side of this is because the insurance rates go up, the companies a lot of times are just canceling, saying, well, we can't afford that, not able to do that. And then what they're realizing is, oh, wait, our contracts require us to have that. And so now they're in violation of their contracts with their clients. And there's a good push from a lot of financial institutions right now that are basically saying in their contracts, look, if you don't have the insurance, if you don't also meet the minimum security standards that we require as a financial institution to be able to work with us and be a third-party contractor of us, then guess what? You're not getting paid until that happens. And we're seeing more of that as well, right? The different organizations are controlling in the contracts where you have to have the insurance, you have to do some minimum security standards, which are really just best practices, right? So that's kind of the main problem there, is that rates are going up, companies can't afford the new rates. What do you do? That's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, let's talk about the root cause of all this. So why are the rates going up? We talked a little bit about the risk factor there, right? So really, what are the insurance companies looking at? Because they're not there every day with you. They're not sitting next to your team on the computer. They're not sitting with the accounting team and seeing what's happening there. They're not sitting with your security team and seeing what's happening there. So what are they actually looking at? Well, they're looking at things like the security posturing, right? And they're looking at the external view. That's what they're getting a look at with things like security scoring. I want to share a story with you. And way, way back in the day, in my younger years, I had a different life, right? And I was a medic in the military. And I volunteered at a Boy Scout camp with, a variety of age ranges. I think the youngest was like 6 or 7, whatever the youngest in Boy Scouts is, up until teenage years. And one of the things I found as volunteering as a medic at that camp was the first couple of days the kids were out there, and they would be out there for about a week. And so the first couple of days they'd be out there, all sorts of issues, right? And especially like on day 1 and day 2, like, I got the stomach virus. Oh, the pain. Oh, my arm hurts. Oh, I've got this headache that just won't go away, et cetera, et cetera. And what I learned is that was just related to the fact they were homesick. And once I realized that, right, once I realized the root cause, I was able to find a solution, which in this case was lemon drops. And that's why you see the lemon drops pictured there. So what I would do is every time a kid came, is, oh, my stomach or my arm or something like that. And I would assess them, of course, and say, okay, their vital signs are good and I don't see anything wrong with their arm. And so I would be able to determine that, okay, the actual cause here is just the fact they're homesick. They miss mom or dad or both or their friends or whatever. And so I would pull out my magic pills, is what I would call them. I said, oh, these are the magic pills. And the magic pills would help take away any pain you have. But you had to take 1 a day. Don't double them up. You might get sick if you double them up. You might get sick, even sicker. Just take 1 a day and come back in a couple of days. Let me know how you're doing, and we'll go from there. If we need to send you to the hospital or something, we'll do so then. Now, when I started this at that camp, a few of the kids actually, they didn't realize these were lemon drops. So they were like, oh, this medicine tastes great. This is the greatest medicine ever. The problem though is that the kids would be there a week and they were recycled through, and new kids would come. But a lot of the kids knew each other because it was Boy Scouts, right? So the next week, kids started knowing that that these were actually just lemon drops. And so it still worked though. The kids understood that what I was trying to do, a lot of them did at the end there, of, hey, it's not a big deal, right? Yes, you're away from home, but this candy makes you feel better. And for those of us that eat candy, we know candy makes you feel better for the most part on everything. So long story short there, figured out the root cause, found a solution. In this case, a delicious solution, but you can't always find the delicious solution in the cyber world. So how are we doing things now? Well, guess what? This is the magical compliance checkbox. And this is really how the vast majority of organizations are doing things, because board members are saying, hey, what are we doing for compliance? Insurers are saying, what are you doing for compliance? Your third parties and your clients are saying, what are you doing for compliance? Check the box, check the box, check the box. And that's what we're doing. Great. At least we're doing something, right? But here's the downside of that. Let's go to the threat actors. Hey, I'm a threat actor. I know that your company is just checking a compliance box. Well, guess what? I know exactly how to attack you now because I know exactly what you're doing. And yes, you might be doing a few things outside of that, but realistically, I'm going to get in. So that's how we're doing it now. Let's change that. And this isn't focused on you as you're in your organization. You might be doing awesome things, but this is a broad statement here that, let's be realistic, a lot of companies are just checking a box. So we're going to briefly talk about a couple of case studies near the end of this presentation, and really just talking about some of the things we should be looking for. So Bank of Ken, which by the way gives awesome loan rates. You can find the loan rates on the dark web, so just go search around there. You'll find that and click every link in there. And then Meow Hospital, because many people that know me know I love cats and they love cats too, so I had to throw a cat picture in here. So Meow Hospital, you can also go there as well. I have heard that the entrance to the hospital is covered in litter. So just FYI on that. So when we talk about the insurance companies, and we're going to focus a blended approach on this presentation of insurance companies and the threat actors. So when we talk about insurance companies, what are they looking at, right? They're looking at your security scoring, and there's a number of places that do this. Security Scorecard is one, and that's one that I actually use. And you can sign up for a free account over there and just get like a simple report and monitor on your organization. You don't get like the deep dive, I don't think, with a free account, but you can at least get some insight into what your company's scoring is right now, or a company that you're interested in. I will say that it's one email address to one account. So if you want to have multiple accounts, this is a workaround. You could technically, I'm not telling you to do anything, you could technically create a few email addresses and technically sign all of them up and technically monitor different companies. So just FYI on that. Again, not telling you to do that, but that is a possible workaround that you may try. So they look at security scoring, and as part of that, again, that's an external view, right? So they're looking at things like your third parties. Are there any attacks going on with them? So, for example, if you were contracted with SolarWinds and they're getting hit, are you at risk then? Does your risk go up because of the third party contractual agreements? They're looking for external vulnerabilities. It might be things you've already patched, right? And we'll talk about what you need to do in that case a little later. Also, any hacker chatter, and I put criminal hacker here because hackers, as we all know, there's a big misperception in the media and stuff. So I don't like to jump on board that train. So criminal hacker here, but that really covers any nation state, all that stuff as well with that the word criminal that I'm using there. So these are some of the things you're looking at. Again, the big thing to take away here is the external view is really what they're looking at. So what can you do? Well, know your security score. I mean, you got to start someplace, right? You have to know what they're seeing on their end, and then you can determine what you can actually do about it. You also need to identify the pathways to critical assets, critical data, your critical services, because that's what the attackers are going after. They're not going to get Jimmy's Excel spreadsheet on his desktop unless that's something critical, right? Otherwise, they could really care less about that. It's not a good use of their time. Most attacks are usually financially motivated or intelligence gathering from nation state or state-sponsored groups. You also need to identify security controls, right? So once you identify the pathways to those critical assets, you also need to identify what controls do we have in place right now and what are we missing, right? And once we identify that, then we have to go through a process of, okay, we're missing these controls. Now, what can we put in place? And we have to basically do a trade-off, right? We have to say, okay, yes, this would be the absolute best possible control we could put in place, but man, that thing's really expensive. Or it takes a lot of human resources to implement, or it takes a lot of time to roll out, and we need something quicker. So there's always a trade-off when you're assessing different controls. It could be a financial cost, could be just a resource cost, could be the ongoing cost, right? Maybe it's pretty easy to set it up and get it going, but maybe it's a long-term cost, right? Maybe it's very expensive to keep maintaining that particular control in place, and maybe it's very resource intensive to keep maintaining that control as well. So there's always a trade-off there that you have to go through when you're thinking through different security controls. The other thing there is, how can you maximize a control, right? How can you maximize security controls? What do I mean? Well, once you have identified the pathways, where's a good spot in that pathway, right? Where maybe it branches off. So thinking about, for example, like your Active Directory infrastructure, where do things branch off, from your forest? Where are the forests connected? Where do things branch off? And can you put a control in place there so it has maximum impact, right? So if I so think of it like a city with roads, right? And so I've got all these roads, but there's only one way in and out of the city. It's across this bridge. So I could, if I was trying to catch a bank robber, I could try to put a police officer on every single street and try to catch a bank robber that way. And, assuming again that I know the bank robber's trying to flee town, or I could just block off the bridge, right? And that's maximum use of my controls. And I maybe only need a couple of officers to do that. So that way not all the officers are taken up stopping the bank robber. So that's what I'm talking about there. Is once you've identified the pathway and where the threat actor may go, then figure out the maximum bang for your buck, so to speak, on security controls and implement those, right? And again, that's going to depend on your organization and what you have set up. So that's something you actually need to take away from this presentation as an after-action item to make sure that you sit down with your team and you start kind of plotting this out, right? Identify pathways to the critical assets, data, services, etc. Then also from there, identify what controls you have in place to protect those right now and what you're missing. And then from there, you can go through the activity of prioritizing and doing the trade-off analysis of those security controls. Once you've identified all that stuff and gotten all that stuff in place, now it's time to sell yourself. And I don't mean like go sell yourself. You're going to sell yourself, your company, your security posture, basically, to the insurance companies and say, hey, wait a minute here. Yes, this is a score. You're trying to give us this rate, but this is what we've done, right? This is what we've recognized, right? These are the things we're doing well. These are the things we're going to do in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, year, 18 months, whatever. You basically want to give them a roadmap, right? Show them like, okay, we're doing this stuff now. We're patching these servers now, for example, and we're going to patch that web server that was showing some vulnerabilities. And then on top of that, 30 days from now, we're going to do this, or 6 months from now, we're going to be doing this, and we're also doing this, 12 months down the line, 18 months down the line, whatever. You want to show that roadmap because that allows them to reduce the risk, right? Just like if I had a car and I had a really bad insurance rate quoted to me, and I say, but wait a minute, I have 12 letters of recommendation from people I know that say I'm the best driver ever. I have video evidence showing I'm the best driver ever. And what I'm going to do immediately is do these things and make sure my hands are 10 and 2 and all these things. And then from there, in 6 months, I'm going to make sure that I've gone through some additional training on driving safely, etc. And then maybe in the year time frame, I'm going to get my license to be able to drive semi trucks, so I've got additional training on driving and safety and things like that. Right? So I'm just giving a roadmap to the insurance company. Now, I don't know if that's going to work with your car insurance. You can try it and let me know. But for these purposes, that's what we're trying to do for the cybersecurity insurers. And as part of this process, there's a secondary benefit, right, of being able to stop a lot of the threat actors, because now you're improving security posture. So you identify the pathways to your critical assets. You've identified how the threat actors are likely going to go down those pathways to get stuff. And you've identified controls you can put in place. Well, guess what? You just stopped a lot of the attacks that were going to be happening on your company, as long as you actually implement things that you've identified. So there's a secondary benefit here, in addition to what the board and executive team would care about of reducing those insurance rates and the financials. The secondary benefit here to the organization itself is now we have an improved security posture. We have a roadmap of things we need to be doing, and we can actually go execute on that roadmap moving forward, and that will reduce our risk overall of threat actors getting in, right? We're just, again, we're not going to keep anyone out completely. If someone wants to get in, they're going to get in. But if we make it more difficult with company A, then they're going to go over to company B and bother them, right? And that's the whole goal here. It's very similar to, you live next to you obviously live next door to your neighbor, but let's say you have a fence, you have, a couple of really big dogs, you have a security system, alarm system, you have a bunch of guns, you have cameras, whatever, right? You have all these things, you have barbed wire, all these things. And your neighbor has none of that stuff, right? If I'm a person that likes to break into houses, whose house am I going to break into? Well, I'm going to go to your neighbor, right? Because that's easier. That's the path of least resistance. And most threat actors want the path of least resistance out there, because a lot of these attacks are financially motivated. So let's just talk quickly about the Bank of Ken and then Meow Hospital on some of the things you should be looking for. So if you are a bank, a financial institution, some of the things you should be just kind of thinking about that might be possible parts of your pathway, right? So Bank of Ken, and this is just kind of a real life example that's based off real events, just like a movie. But I'm going to change just about everything, aside from the fact international locations, just so I don't give any indicators away of actually who this was. But worked with a financial institution, and it wasn't actually a bank, but financial institution that offered a software solution to banks and other financial clients of theirs. Basically a cloud-based solution. And so that was one significant risk area that was getting flagged. International location, so they were international and had actual physical offices around the world and dealt in different areas around the world. They stored a lot of sensitive data in public cloud environments, which actually is scary if you kind of think about that, and it was not secured properly. So just some of the things they had to keep in mind when they went through the pathway and security control activities. But here's what happened with them. Initially, their insurance rates went through the roof, and after going through the process that I shared with you previously, they were able to reduce the quotes and everything, and working through identifying, or at least last I knew, working through identifying the best policy for them, right? But their rates went down because they were able to show that their security posture had improved to the insurers, and that was a critical part. On top of that, they were able to, as part of the activity, actually identify some vulnerabilities they didn't know about. They had some web servers out there they didn't actually know about, and so they were able to improve their security posture overall. And then Meow Hospital, and this is also based on real life events. So Meow Hospital was actually a healthcare organization that was hit with ransomware. So when we see a lot about, okay, patient record systems are locked out. They can't treat patients. They can't get the data, whatever. That's one facet of these healthcare attacks, but there are many other aspects that probably don't make the news so much, right? So obviously we know the EMR, EHR systems, and that's electronic medical record systems or electronic health record systems. So EMRs you usually see in like doctors' offices and smaller organizations. Usually hospitals use EHR, and really a lot of, I mean, these days things are just kind of blended, right? It's patient record system essentially. There's some different features on both, which we won't dive into. Patient data is one aspect that a lot of people think about. Like, okay, the patient data, the doctor can't see what happened with your blood pressure last week. But what about the employee data in these events, right? It doesn't mean that the data for employees is not going to be compromised. And in fact, with the ransomware attack I mentioned, the employee data was compromised as well, right? They literally got like everything. And this was an organization still running like some Windows 2000 and Windows 95 stuff. Yeah, I know that's scary, right? And so naturally, of course, they were an easy target. And the other thing here, medical devices. So not just like pacemakers, defibrillators. I've actually, with testing many years ago when I worked as a pen tester in healthcare, I actually turned off a defibrillator remotely. And this is back when they were just starting to do the remote monitoring of pacemakers and defibrillators. Nowadays, it's commonplace. But I showed how I could turn off the defibrillator feature where it would just be a pacemaker, and showed the vendor that. And so the vendor went back, and fortunately for them, and kudos to them for fixing the issue in the code. But medical devices, and not just pacemakers, defibrillators, but infusion pumps, your x-ray equipment, all sorts of equipment in the hospital. If you've ever gone to even the dentist office, there's just so many things to play with. There's just so many things that you can attack. It's just crazy the number of devices you can attack, and most of them are extremely vulnerable. So when you're a healthcare organization, you really need to consider what are all the entry points here, not just what's the typical entry point of, Susan in accounting clicks a link in an email, but how else might somebody attack, and what's the actual impact financially as well as the human life? Because if you turn off a defibrillator on someone and they need that shock to take them out of ventricular fibrillation, which is basically just where your heart's like brr, brr, all day long type of thing, and it's very dangerous, and that's in the lower chambers of your heart. But if it's fibrillating like that, and you don't have a defibrillator to shock you back into a normal rhythm for your heart, the person can literally die. They literally, in some cases, may essentially drown. Their heart may drown in blood. And so these are real things. These are real things that can happen, and these have been vulnerabilities around for years. So that's another consideration. And the last one here that people seem to forget about is communication. So what happens when someone attacks the communication of the hospital? So code blue is a code called when it's a life and death situation in the hospital. And so somebody may be going into cardiac arrest, or it may be suspected that they are, or something. And so that basically calls a special team in most hospitals where they come running, doctors, nurses, etc., as well as the local team. And by local, I just mean on the unit itself. So there's a number of people that come running to save the day. But what happens if they can't ever get that call? And you're laying in the hospital bed, or your grandma is, or your other loved one, and you can't. They're calling code blue on the floor, but that communication is not going anywhere. No one's able to hear that. Guess what? Grandma dies. That's unfortunate, but that's reality. So the communication is one other thing on hospitals that a lot of people forget about, but that's a key one as well. What happens when people shut that down? So all considerations you need to think about, and these are just a couple of different use cases there. Now, that particular healthcare organization that this use case is based on, they wasn't around cyber insurance or anything, but it was around the threat actor angle. And so they were able to actually improve their security posture over time and mitigate a lot of future attacks, because they really got pwned. They really got pwned with that organization. So I just want to open it up now to any questions. Throw those in the chat. So kind of a brief presentation here, but the main takeaways here are: go look at your security scoring if you don't have that already. Just, again, security scorecard is just one, but that's the one I like to use personally. Go there, sign up for a free account. You can usually get a free account. Just pull up your company. Usually a free account won't let you deep dive. It'll just show you the very 10,000 foot level. But take a look at that. Identify kind of the major areas and say, okay, let's either, number one, pay for a security scorecard or another service and see the deeper dive, or let's just take this information on these top level things, go back to the drawing board and start working through the process of identifying what are our critical assets, critical data, services, etc., in these areas. And then on top of that, what are the pathways to those? How might a threat actor go through those? Who are the threat actors targeting us usually based on our type of industry and where we are geographically in the world? And then what controls do we have in place right now to protect against attack? And then finally, with that part, what controls are we missing? And then you need to do that trade-off analysis. This is not a hour-long process, by the way. This is something you need to take back. It's going to take you probably a couple of weeks at least as an organization to go through as a team and work through these things. But these are the things that you need to be doing. And then once you've determined that stuff, then you can work on with insurers if you're trying to reduce your rate or whatever. You can work on positioning yourself better and saying, okay, this is kind of our roadmap of what we're going to do. And even if you're not trying to improve your insurance rates, let's say your rates stay the same, you've been fortunate, that's cool. This process, though, will help you improve your security posture overall. And so you'll be able to finally have a roadmap, essentially, to go take to the executive team. And that also helps you with budget, right? We all scream about, I need more budget. I need cybersecurity budget. We don't get enough budget, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's great. How are you positioning that to executives, right? They only care about the numbers, right? Honestly, I'm an executive. I'm telling you, I only care about the numbers. And so you need to communicate that. And this is an easy way for you to do that if you're a more technical person, more practitioner type of person, and less political business type of person. Then this is a great way to show exactly what you need to be doing and the cost of everything and the cost financially, resource-wise, etc. And you just present that information to the stakeholders, the leadership, and say, hey, this is kind of the plan. And we need your input. And if you want to do some of these things, you need to give us more money, right? You need to give us some more money. I need more money. Pay me, right? So it allows you to go get more budget and everything as well. So there's a lot of benefits to doing this process. And you need to do it, right? Because again, as we talked about in the beginning, most organizations are checking a box. Don't be like them. If you're just checking a box right now, then go through this process. Again, this can benefit you multiple ways. It can help secure your organization a little bit better. It can help improve insurance rates and reduce rates on that. It can also help you land contracts, because if other businesses are seeing that you're doing the things you need to be doing and your competitor isn't, I've actually won contracts before because of that. And even though my rate was higher, I won the contract because they noticed that the competitor wasn't doing what they should be doing. So all this stuff can benefit your organization. This is part of pivoting the mindset out there that security is just a cost-centered focus. We're trying to pivot the mindset here to where it's a financial benefit for the organization to improve that security posture. So again, if there's any questions at all, throw them in the chat real quick here and we'll get them answered for you. Thanks everyone for coming out today. Hope you've been enjoying the conference. Love this conference. I wasn't able to make it in person this year, but absolutely love this conference. It's a great one, so be sure to come back next year. If you're attending virtual this year, then by all means, do your best next year to come in person to the conference. You'll meet some really, really awesome people at the Texas Cyber Summit.